What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me again. We're about to jump back into 1 Corinthians. We're going to be in 1 Corinthians 11 today, and the topic's going to be communion or the Lord's Supper. And on this topic, this is one of the things that has really helped me as far as my health issues go. Now, I'm not the perfect specimen of health, but I used to have severe stomach issues. I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. I used to have severe allergies and sinus trouble, and now my stomach issues are almost completely gone, and I'd say I have mild allergies and sinuses, and I'm believing this is going to end up all going away. And understanding what the body means when we take communion has really helped with that. And not only that, just understanding that Jesus' body was broken in general for my healing. You know, the Bible says, by his stripes we are healed. Those cat o' nine tails that was ripping his flesh was actually this life-giving bread being thrown out amongst us so we could partake of that and have his health. Jesus was super healthy, so you're partaking from his body. That means you're taking on his health. There's other scriptures where it talks about he took on our infirmities. He's actually talking about he took on our sicknesses upon his own body. And as I got to seeing that and understanding that, I'm like, hey, this is coming from that curse. Satan's attacking us with this. Something's not right here. And I started believing, hey, I'm supposed to be healthy in Jesus. Now, I still took my medicine. I still go to the doctor if I believe I need to go to the doctor. But I go to Jesus, and any medicine I take, it's just supplementing my faith. And hey, I barely take any medicines now. Well, I really don't take any medicines. I take a vitamin here and there. But I used to take allergy medicines every day. I had allergy shots. I used to take stuff for my stomach. Now I don't take anything, and I truly believe it's coming from these things we're about to look at today. But before we jump into 1 Corinthians 11, we're going to jump into Exodus, and we're going to look at a story. It's known as the Passover story. And this is when the Egyptians had enslaved the Israelites, and God sent Moses in there to set them free. And of course, the Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he was not going to release them. So God unleashed these plagues upon Egypt. And the plagues, you know, he turned all their water into blood. They didn't have drinking water. He had a plague of frogs wherever they looked. Everywhere they looked, there was frogs in the bed, you know, in the oven, wherever. There was plague of lice, where lice was all over them, flies, you know, the livestock. There was a pestilence killing their livestock. They had bulls came up on their body, you know, that sickness was coming on them. Hail was coming down. Locust was eating all of their crops. And then they had darkness. And then there's going to be one last plague, and this is the plague where the firstborn within Israel would die. Whether it's male, female, animal, whatever, the firstborn was going to die. And that's what we're fixing to look at. But he allowed the Israelites to do something, because they were in Egypt in slavery, but he allowed them to do something where that angel of death would pass over them. So let's look at this story real quick before we jump into the communion section. All right, first he told them they had to get a lamb. And he says, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boil at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. And thus you shall eat it with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. I like that last part. Not only was it taking on the firstborn, he was taking on all the gods of Egypt. Now, some people he's talking about the people who saying they were gods, but Pharaoh was considered a god. He's considered the embodiment of the sun god. He don't die here. What that's talking about, I believe, there was these gods, these Nephilim were there, and they were worshiping these Nephilim. He's like, I'm fixing to take that out. Of course, you'd have to understand all the other parts of the Nephilim in Genesis to understand that. But anyways, I think that's a cool little side note right there. He says, I am the Lord. He continues, now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So this day shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. So the angel of death was going to come by, take out all the firstborn, but he allowed the Egyptians to kill a lamb. Let's go back real quick, see what it says. It says they're going to take the blood of that lamb and put it on the doorpost. And it's a sign on the outside of that house. And that angel of death is going to come through. It's going to see that blood. It's going to pass over that house. The ones within the house with the blood on the doorpost, they will be saved from the wrath of God. Now, the Passover, this is a shadow of Jesus. It's showing what Jesus is going to do. The blood of the Lamb saved them, just like the blood of the Lamb, we're going to see here in communion. It brings us forgiveness of sin, so the wrath of God does not fall on us. His wrath is passing over us. Anybody's not accepted Him, they don't have the blood covering them. The blood ain't on their doorpost, so the wrath of God is going to get them. So that is a picture of Jesus' sacrifice. But look what else they did. But then they would eat the flesh of that lamb that night. It said it is roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Again, that's a picture of Jesus. Jesus on the cross, it said he took the full wrath of God. You know, the Bible talks about he has a fiery wrath. It even says when Jesus comes back, his eyes will be like fire. And of course, the second death, you're actually burning in a fiery lake. That's what the second death is. This is a picture that Jesus has took on the full wrath. Just like this animal said, it had to be roasted in fire. They ate it with unleavened bread. Unleavened means it don't have yeast in it. Yeast represents sin. So this bread represents something without sin. And it's actually a matzah bread here. And how they prepare that, they poke holes all in it. Picture of Jesus getting nails in him at the cross. He had holes in him. And then they bake it in an oven. It is roasted as well. It's showing that the fire of God is on it. But they are to partake of that lamb. Bitter herbs. Of course, it's a bitter thing that happened to Jesus. You know, it's all a picture of what happened to Jesus. Now look what it says next. Don't eat it raw. Don't boil it. It has to be roasted in fire. It says his head, its legs, its entrails, its inside, every bit of this will be roasted. That's how you're going to eat it. Again, picture that lamb is taking on their wrath. Instead of them having to die, the lamb is taking it. They couldn't even leave any of it. If they had anything left on her, they had to completely burn it. It's completely gone. And again, that's the picture of the second death, and that's what Jesus was going through at the cross. So the Passover is a picture of him. But look, it says, as he eats it, though, it says, eat it with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, so you shall eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. What he's telling them, hey, your victory's here, be ready to go. Through this lamb and the death of these outsiders, the punishment falling on them, you're fixing to get out of there. And he says, be prepared to get out of there. You're eating this so you can go. He says, you're fixing to get out of this land. All right? Then we went through these scriptures and saw what he said he was going to do. The Lord was going to pass over. So we're going to jump to Exodus 12:33 now and continue the story. The angel of death comes through. He kills all the firstborn. The the Israelites are good. They have been saved. And after this happens, it says the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowl bound up and their clothes on their shoulders. The Egyptians, as horrible things went through their land, all the firstborn has died. Again, that's man, woman, child, animal, whatever. And when this happens, they done been through all these plagues. They're sitting here thinking, hey, we done seen all of this happen. Water, frogs, lice, boy, our livestock is gone, or our grain and stuff has been eat up by these locusts. Now you've killed the firstborn. They say, get them out of here or we're all going to be dead. He said, it's time for them to leave. So the people said they took their dough before it was leavened. Hey, they're getting out of there. They're about to roll out. says, now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. So God told them, you go through there and tell the Egyptians to give you silver, gold, and clothes for your travels. It says, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. So not only was the slaves getting to leave, the Egyptians were so ready to get rid of them. It says God gave them favor. Hey, they were ready for them to go. They're saying, hey, whatever you want, take it. We want you out of here. So the Egyptians went in there and plundered from the Egyptians. They were receiving things they did not earn, is what was happening here. By the way, that's a picture of grace. We've accepted Jesus. Now God is taking care of us. We found favor in the sight of the Lord, and God is going to provide for us. Again, this Passover is the same picture of what's happening in Jesus today. We're not working for His favor and His blessings. He's given us that favor. We're looking at Him. We're looking at Jesus. His love and forgiveness and grace is transforming us from the inside out. Therefore, through faith, we start to do things. You know, God starts working through us. It don't mean we don't do anything and just sit back and take His blessings, but Jesus did do everything, and so we could be blessed, but as we rest in those blessings, we'll naturally start changing. But it's the same picture here. They was just giving that to them. All right? And now I'll show you something else, though. So they were receiving provisions, but if you jump to Psalms 105, look what this says. Psalms 105, it's actually recounting this story, talking about how God brought them out of Egypt. It says, God also destroyed all the firstborn in their land, the first of all their strength. He also brought them out with silver and gold. Now look at this next part. And there were none feeble among His tribes. There's a reason that's in there. Well, He didn't have to tell us there was none feeble. If they're not feeble, it means they're not sick, they're not weak. It's saying they're strong. It is estimated there was around 2 million Israelites. Not one of them. And there was super old ones, there was young ones, all in between. Not one of them was feeble. They were ready to go. And they went. And they got out of there. Pharaoh chases them. Hey, they crossed that sea, which was probably hard, even though it was dry ground. And we know the Red Sea closed up on the Egyptians. But they went through there, and there was nothing wrong with them. Now, how can that be? We know how the world is today. That's not natural. The reason it's not natural is because they ate the flesh of that lamb. That lamb gave them strength. It gave them strength, and that's a picture of what Jesus has done. Again, by His stripes, we are healed. You've got to understand it. Many people are missing out on this because they don't understand it. They don't know this is a truth that they can receive. We're going to jump now to Matthew. I want to show you something in Matthew. This is when Jesus actually gives the Lord's Supper. This is when it occurs. He is actually, though, doing what God told the Israelites to do. He told them, if you remember earlier when we looked at it, He says, you will continue to do this as a memorial. You are going to continue to do the Passover to remember when God got you out of Egypt. So let's look at this. Jesus is fixing to change the Passover. He's fixing to show us as believers, we're not remembering He brought them out of Egypt. We're going to remember what Jesus has done for us. Matthew 26:19. It says, so the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. So they prepared the Passover meal. We already explained what it was. We're jumping down to verse 26. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. He doesn't say, this is the lamb's body. We're remembering this is the lamb. He tells them, this is my body. Now look, the disciples had been with Him on this journey the whole time. They had been celebrating Passover since they were young. They knew that lamb gave them strength to get out of there. They knew that blood saved their ancestors. Now He's saying, take, eat, this is my body. They had been around Jesus. Jesus is super healthy. He don't get sick. Sick people touch His body and they become well. You know, that goes against the natural world. The natural world says, don't you get around sick people, you'll get sick. He's the opposite of that. He's telling them now, take, eat, this is my body. He's showing them, this is my health imparted to you. That's what He's saying there. And He says in 27, Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remissions of sin. He doesn't say, this is, drink from this cup. We're remembering the blood of that lamb that was on the doorpost. No, he's saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood. And we know his blood brought us into a new covenant. We're not under the covenant of law anymore. We're not trying to be right with God by our ability to follow his law. None of us can do it. That's why Jesus died. We are righteous by faith. We're right through the blood of Jesus. That's the new covenant. Jesus has fulfilled all the requirements for us to be right. And then again, as we behold Jesus, we're fixing to see, we become more like him and we start living it out. But his blood shed out for the remissions of sins, the forgiveness of sins. That means his blood has saved us from the wrath of God, just like that lamb's blood saved them. Again, Passover was a picture of Jesus. That is exactly what that is a picture of. So we see Jesus has instituted it here and he has made it something new. Now the disciples didn't understand all this at the time, but we do today, and they learned later too after Jesus was resurrected. But now we're going to jump into 1 Corinthians. We're going to jump into 1 Corinthians 11, and we're going to see Paul talking about how we should partake of the Lord's Supper. We're going to start in verse 17. He says, Now in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, but for the worse. For first of all, when you come together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and in part I believe it. Now, Paul's talking to the Corinthians. We have already seen at the beginning of 1 Corinthians, he gets on them because they're splitting up based on who baptized them. They had a problem of division within their local church. And he says, when you come together as a church, and again, a building is not a church. You're not going to church. You gather as the church. You're the church. You are the temple of God. He lives in you, and you're coming together as the church, all right? But he's saying, he's telling the Corinthians, you're not coming together as together, though. There's divisions among you. And that's one thing communion does. Communion means we're a community of believers. We've been brought into the family. When we partake of communion, we're remembering we're part of the family. Some people get super caught up in that, though. It's about communion, us being together. We come together. If you want to get to traditions, we're fixing to see the tradition. We come together to remember what Jesus has done for us. Part of that is he did bring us into the family, but we're remembering what he did for us at the cross. Paul continues, For there must also be factions among you, that those who are approved may be recognized among you. Therefore, when you come together in one place, it's not to eat the Lord's Supper. All right, they were coming together, and it's showing they're splitting up, but he's saying, you're gathering with people who are approved and who are recognized among you. What had happened here, this had become like a country club pretty much. I got to thinking about, we had a homecoming week, and one of our days was country versus country club, and all these girls was coming up in their skirts and their nice dresses, and boys were all preppy and dressed up in their khakis, and it really dawned on me, man, that's what the church is doing. We had made this like a country club type thing. And then I even got to thinking about it. Most people within local churches, they only talk to their certain clique, to their certain group. This was happening back then. We're all together, and what they were doing when they were taking the Lord's Supper, they were just doing it with their clique. They weren't worried about anybody else. But now they weren't really eating the Lord's Supper. They were just coming to hang out. Again, like a country club, it shouldn't be that way. The Lord's Supper is to remember what Jesus has done. And it said they come together to do that. And by the way, that's what the church is supposed to do. We gather to partake of the Lord's Supper. That is why we're supposed to take it every Sunday. Look what Acts 20 says. Now, on the first day of the week, that's Sunday, when the disciples come together to break bread, that's talking about that. They're coming together to partake of the Lord's Supper. This is my body broken for you. Then they take the wine. Remember his forgiveness. We're supposed to do that. And here's another sad thing. The Satan has come within the church saying, hey, this ain't a big deal. Some places don't do it but like 4 quarters. Some people won't take it because they don't know how to take it. They think you're all taking it unworthily, but it's super simple. He's fixing to show us how you take it unworthily. People's not unworthy to take it. You can take it in an unworthy way. But that's one thing that we do. We're going to have it every time we meet. I encourage you to take it at home. There's a lot of people say, well, you can't take it at home. You got to be a priest. You got to be this. The Bible says we're a royal priesthood. You can partake of communion at home. You're remembering what Jesus did for you. Constantine, way back, Emperor Constantine, he instituted a bunch of this stuff we do today that's not biblical. These priests all dressing up and having more honor than everybody else. It's not biblical. This attire we wear, it's not biblical. You're giving honor to other people over other people. It's never supposed to have been that way. But we come to break bread, and you can do that at home. I know there's an order in a church. You need somebody to be able to go over the stuff and pass it out. But at home, there's an order. A husband can do it. If there's no husband there, the female can do it. Again, we're a royal priesthood, and I encourage you to do it because you're remembering what Jesus has done for you. Back to 1 Corinthians. Paul's telling them, though, you are not coming to eat the Lord's Supper. For in eating, each one takes his own supper ahead of others, and one is hungry and another's is drunk. He's saying, y'all not waiting on everybody to get here. You just getting your clique here. You're eating with him. So some of y'all even getting drunk. Y'all getting the wine and getting drunk. Y'all just having a big party, and we know getting drunk is a sin as well. They were really messing this up big time. Then he says, what? Do you not have houses to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I do not praise you. He's telling them now, hey, do you not have your own houses where you can eat like that? Where you can get together with your clique in your own houses? And then he says, or you despise the church of God? He's saying, do you despise your other brothers and sisters? Some of them don't have the means to get together like that. Yet you're ignoring them and eating, drinking all the drink. They're coming, there's nothing left. They can't even partake of the Lord's Supper. Again, when you eat supper together, it's showing you're a family. And it's sad, many Christians, they don't even want to be with their family members. They just don't care. But he's telling them, if you're not going to come for the right reasons to remember what Jesus done be with your family, he says, hey, do it at home. And again, he's not praising them here. He says, for I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus on the same night which he was betrayed took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for me, which is broken for you, Do this in remembrance of me. Why are we supposed to come the first of the week? Why are we supposed to continue doing it, which we're going to see here in a minute throughout the week? In remembrance of him. Every time you take communion, when that body's broken, you remember it was broken for your health. It helps you impart faith in that. Faith comes by hearing the word. As you believe that and you look to Jesus, you will see it manifest more and more in your life. He says, in the same manner, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. He's saying now, this is the new covenant. You're living in grace today. You're not under law. You're forgiven in my blood. When you drink this, do it in remembrance of me. Every time you partake of that, you're remembering what Jesus has done for you. You're remembering you can receive health from him, and you're remembering you've received forgiveness in him. I think God instituted this, and he wants us to do this every time we meet because this is purely focused on the works of Jesus. It has nothing to do with us. When you partake of the Lord's Supper, you are remembering what Jesus has done for you. If you've been following along with this ministry, that's the main thing, because as you behold Jesus, that's how you change. 2 Corinthians 3:18. It's like a broken record here, but it's a beautiful record. But we all, with unveiled face, we're not looking at the law. We're not trying to be right with God by laws and rules. We strive to do right, but that ain't what makes us right. When we behold in the mirror, we behold the glory of the Lord. When we're looking when we look at ourselves, we're supposed to see we're alive in Jesus. And as we look to Jesus, we are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. The Holy Spirit in us is transforming us into Jesus' image as we look to Jesus. When you partake of communion and you hear this is his body broken for you, and you know it's for your healing, you're looking at Jesus' healing attributes. Therefore, you are receiving that bit by bit as you do it, even as you say it, even as you read about it, even as you meditate on it. But communion is actually an act of faith where you're speaking it and you're doing an act showing it. You can make it a a tradition or some type of ritual. It shouldn't be a ritual. You're doing it to remember him. Some churches make it a ritual. They just go up there and do it and sit down. It ain't even a big deal. You do it to remember what Jesus has done for you. All right? He keeps going here back to 1 Corinthians. He says, for often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. See, as you're doing that, you're proclaiming your victory in his death. If Jesus never died, then you couldn't have died in him and be brought out from under the covenant of the law. If Jesus didn't die and then come back, he was resurrected, then there is no victory. You're proclaiming, I got victory in Jesus till he comes, when he comes back from heaven and gets us. We proclaim that on earth. If you quit complaining that, you'll start thinking you're losing. Satan's going to hit you with sickness. I'm sick all the time. You're going to whine and complain. You're not proclaiming your victory in what Jesus has done, so you'll live in it. You're not going to be, so many Christians are wondering if they're really saved or not because they quit proclaiming Jesus is the one that has saved me. And it's actually when you do that, you're bringing on that curse in your life. It's just making your life worse. You're going to see you're bringing judgment on yourself. It ain't God judging you. You're bringing it on yourself because you're not proclaiming what Jesus has done for you. And communion is proclaiming our victory in Jesus. It is proclaiming our hope in what we have in him. Now, as far as the health goes, look what he says next. Verse 27. Therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner. Do you see that? Some churches say you're unworthy to take communion if you have any sin in your life. That's not true. That's a lie. You're taking communion to remember you're forgiven of sins. You're taking the cup to remember you have been in the new covenant now of grace. That's why you take it. It's saying don't take it in an unworthy manner. It's not saying you're unworthy to take it, but it says if you take it in an unworthy manner, you'll be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. What you're saying is you're going to be guilty. You're not taking it in the correct way because you're not remembering what it has done for you. Now, there's no power in the supper. The power is in what the supper represents. And even today, we done got it now. We don't even really do the supper. It's just cracker and juice. And that's okay because that cracker and juice or wine, you can remember what he's done for you. 28 says, but let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of the bread and drink of the cup. Now, examine themselves as am I taking this to remember what Jesus has done, or am I just going through the motions, or do I not care at all? I'm just coming up here and wanting to hang out with my buddies, all right? You're taking it unworthily in any of those ways. But then he's going to show us a big one way we take it unworthily. For he who eats and drinks in an unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment to himself. Look, you're bringing judgment on yourself. A lot of people say God's putting this on you. No, you do it to yourself. Now, what is happening in this instance? They're not discerning the Lord's body. You're not discerning the Lord's body. Many people do that. They're lumping the body and the blood together. You look at Passover. The blood on the door is what allowed that angel of death to pass over them, the lamb's blood. We had just saw it is Jesus' blood. Let me find it right here. This is the new covenant in my blood. It's his blood that brought us in a new covenant. The other one said where you receive remissions of sin. That's what the blood is about. But a lot of people lump the body and the blood together for forgiveness of sins, and they don't discern the Lord's body. And when you don't discern the Lord's body, which I showed you, it's for your health. For this reason, many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. Many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. They're not discerning the Lord's body. When they take that bread, they're not remembering, hey, Jesus' body brings me health. By his stripes, I am healed. They're not receiving it. Now, the inverse of that is you're remembering it, therefore you become stronger, healthier, and you'll live longer. That's the opposite of that. And when you don't do that, you're not receiving the benefits of what Jesus has done for you because you're not putting your faith in it. And many people, hey, look, they take the blood in an unworthy way. They're not remembering they're forgiven. They're not remembering He's the one that's bringing grace to them. And then they leave the church and they feel horrible because they fail and they think they're worthless. They put themselves back under the law. They're bringing judgment on themselves. They're judging themselves, and it's hurting them. You got to remember, Jesus has done everything for you, including He wants to bring health to you. Remember Psalms? He brought them out with silver and gold. Jesus is providing for us. That's the new covenant. The good things happen to us not because we deserve it, because the blood of Jesus paid the price for it to happen. Even when troubles comes and persecutions comes and weakness comes, we talked about that last week, we can still praise God in those moments because we know He's taking care of it. He's strong in our weakness, and there was none feeble. Remember, Passover represents what Jesus has done for us. And we need to see, hey, our health is found in His body. Just like people would touch Him, they will get healed. Hey, you're touching that bread and you're remembering, hey, Jesus has done this for me, and you're partaking. Again, there's no power in the bread. Some people say it turns into His flesh. That ain't the case. You're remembering what He's done for you. And then you will start to receive that health in your life. All right, it continues here. For if we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged. If we'd examine ourselves and say, am I taking this for the right reasons? Am I remembering, hey, I am forgiven? Am I remembering there is health here? But when we are judged, we're chastened by the Lord. Again, we judge ourselves, and then God, that chastens, that's child trains. He's coming in training, just like Paul is doing here. That's one way he's doing. He's telling them, you're not doing this the right way. It don't feel good at first. Nobody likes to hear they're doing wrong. But he says, this is happening that we may not be condemned with the world. It's happening so you don't receive all the stuff happening in the world. It's so you can still keep your head up and know, hey, I am forgiven. When everybody else has their head down, they know they're worthless. It's so you can go through and say, hey, I can receive this health when the world says, no, you're supposed to be sick. This is on you. If you're not taking it in the correct way, you will start falling into all that stuff of the world. You'll start believing the stuff of the world. Again, that chastening is child trained. You're trained in the Spirit. You train through preachers. You train through the Word. He's coming through you, trying to open your eyes, say, remember to take this the right way. There's many in the church, they're weak, sick, and dying early. They don't discern the Lord's Supper. Hey, I've heard people say, God put this sickness on you to wake you up. If you believe that, you're never going to go God for health. And if you go to the doctor, then you're going against God's will in your life. It don't even make sense. But all that is, you haven't been renewed in your mind, and you're believing the wrong thing. And you're condemning your own self. That's what's going on there. So Paul tells them here, in conclusion, therefore, my brethren, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. If it's in a church setting, wait for everybody to get there. Do it as a family. If anyone's hungry, eat at home. Don't be coming to church for that, which our world's changed so much because we do just the cracker and the juice. So we're not falling into this as much anymore. But you can fall into it not coming to remember what He's done. Because He's saying when you come and you're not remembering what He's done for you, you're just putting judgment on yourself. And he says, and the rest I will set in order when I come. So he says, I'll talk about it more later. But I'm going to tell you something. This is huge. You need to partake of communion every Sunday. If you go to churches that don't do it, try to get it instituted. If they won't do it, hey, leave. Go somewhere where they do it. This is reminding you of the works of Jesus. We have a problem. There's so many places focused on the works of man. Hey, our works got us into this mess. If we will behold Jesus, we'll change. And communion, I'm telling you, it is a picture of what He's done for you. Not only do I encourage you to just do it at church, do it at home, especially if you're sick or something's going on. Just make sure you remember why you're doing it. If you're remembering what Jesus has done for you, you're not taking it in an unworthy manner. We do it all the time at our house. I'll take it with our family. A lot of times, if we got time, we'll do it before we go to school. And we remember we're in His favor no matter what happens. We remember His health's on us. And that don't mean we don't ever get sick and Satan don't come against us. But as we have continued to look at it and speak these things, we have become healthier and healthier. And no matter what happens to me, I don't care if I get struck down with something crazy tomorrow, I'm going to continue to say, Jesus is my health. I'm going to keep putting my hope in Him. Hey, it gives you that positive attitude, and I ain't running around thinking it's the end of the world. That's how He wants us to live. He wants us to live in victory. Look, Jesus is your victory. You need to be walking around with a belt on and the staff in your hand, your feet ready to go. He's your victory. And as you partake of communion, you're remembering that every time. And we would love for you to come join us at Raise Ministries, where we partake every time. If you're not going anywhere, come join us, come worship with us together. It's great to learn and hear these things on the internet, But when you got that family you can talk to, you can interact with, you can grow together, it just makes things so much better. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you guys all have a blessed one.